Welcome to Scary Spooky Time, where nightmares come to life. Beware what lurks in the shadows, because we're about to shine a light on the unknown. Today's video, Cult Horrors, 5 Terrifying True Stories, explores 5 spine-chilling accounts of cults and their dark deeds. These allegedly true stories will leave you questioning the power of blind faith and the depths of human depravity. So buckle up, turn off the lights, and get ready to enter a world beyond your wildest nightmares, where the darkness is calling. Warnings and disclaimers. The following stories contain graphic depictions of violence, cult activity, and disturbing themes that may be triggering or unsettling for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The stories presented in this video may be fictional and may not be based on real events or individuals. They are shared for entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed in the stories do not reflect those of the video creators or the platform on which it is shared. Now, with all of that out of the way, let the nightmares begin.
It all started when I was at a low point in my life. My girlfriend had just broken up with me, and I was struggling to find a sense of purpose. That's when I met a man at a coffee shop who seemed to have all the answers. He was charming, charismatic, and spoke with such conviction that I couldn't help but be drawn to him. He told me about a community he was a part of, one that was focused on achieving enlightenment and transcendence. He spoke of a world beyond our physical realm, where we could exist in a state of pure consciousness. It sounded like the answer to all of my problems. I was hesitant at first, but he convinced me to attend one of their gatherings. When I arrived, everyone was dressed in white robes, and there was a palpable sense of energy in the air. The leader spoke about their philosophy and the path to enlightenment. It all sounded so appealing, but then things started to take a dark turn. The leader began to talk about sacrifice and the need to shed our physical bodies to achieve transcendence. I was taken aback, but everyone else seemed to be accepting of it. I began to question whether I was just being closed-minded. The next thing I knew, I was being initiated into the community. I was given a white robe and told that I was now part of something bigger than myself. I thought I had found my purpose, but I was wrong. As time went on, the teachings became more and more twisted. We were made to perform bizarre rituals and ceremonies, and the people in charge became increasingly controlling. It wasn't until I was handed that knife and asked to make a sacrifice that I realized how far things had gone. As we walked towards the center of the camp, I saw dozens of people, all dressed in white robes, gathered around a large bonfire. Their faces were expressionless, and their eyes seemed empty. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and I hesitated. But my curiosity got the better of me. The man leading me pulled me closer to the fire, and I saw a woman lying on the ground, tied up and screaming. Her body was covered in cuts, bruises, and burn marks. The cultists were chanting in unison, and I recognized the language as Latin. I didn't understand the words, but the tone was sinister, and it sent chills down my spine. The leader turned to me and grasped both of his hands around the hand I held the knife, forcing me to slightly raise the blade up into the air. "It's time for you to make your sacrifice," he said with a smile. I froze, unable to comprehend what he was asking me to do. "Go on, do it," he urged. "Take your place among your brothers and sisters in eternal bliss." I was in shock, and when I didn't react right away, his smile turned into a scowl. "Or do you not believe in our cause? Do you not want to achieve eternal life?" I looked at the knife in my hand, and then at the woman on the ground, still screaming in agony. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I threw the knife to the ground and tried to run, but the cultists grabbed me and dragged me back to the fire. "You don't get to leave," the leader hissed. "You're one of us now. You can never leave." I was forced to participate in their rituals and ceremonies. I was made to torture and kill innocent people, all in the name of their twisted beliefs. I lost all sense of self, and I became numb to the horrors around me. I was a puppet, a tool for their wicked schemes. But as time went on, I started to question their teachings. I realized that what they were doing was not right. It was evil, and I couldn't be a part of it anymore. One night, when the camp was quiet, I made my escape. I ran through the woods, not stopping until I was miles away. But the scars of my time with the cult still haunt me. I have nightmares of their rituals and the people I was made to hurt. I now live my life in constant fear that they will find me and drag me back into their twisted world. But I will never forget the lessons I learned from my time with the cult. I learned that blind faith can lead to unspeakable evil, and that we must always question the beliefs we hold dear.
I never thought I would become a member of a cult. I was just a curious college student, seeking some kind of spiritual enlightenment. But everything changed when I met Julian. He was charming, handsome, and mysterious. He always wore a black robe and a silver pendant with a strange symbol that I didn't recognize. He told me that he was a member of a secret society, dedicated to uncovering the mysteries of the universe. He invited me to join them, and I accepted. I was initiated into the cult of the Black Sun, and soon I found myself immersed in a world of strange rituals and esoteric knowledge. The cult was led by a man named Marcus, who claimed to be a prophet of the Black Sun, an ancient deity that had been worshipped by a lost civilization. At first, everything seemed harmless. We meditated, we chanted, we studied ancient texts. But then Marcus started to reveal the darker aspects of our beliefs. He taught us that the Black Sun demanded blood sacrifices, and that we had to offer our own blood to appease it. I was horrified, but I didn't want to leave. The cult had become my family, and I felt like I had found a purpose in life. Julian became a closest friend and confidant, and I trusted him completely. But then I started to notice strange things happening around me. People disappeared, without any explanation. There were rumors of secret chambers beneath the cult's headquarters, where unspeakable things were happening. One night, I followed Julian into the basement. I saw him performing a ritual, surrounded by other members of the cult. They had captured a young woman, and they were cutting her with a knife, collecting her blood in a chalice. I was frozen with fear, but Julian saw me and motioned for me to come closer. He whispered in my ear that this was the ultimate test of my loyalty, and that I had to participate. I hesitated, but then Marcus appeared. He was holding a silver knife, and his eyes were glowing with an unnatural light. He told me that I had been chosen to be the vessel of the Black Sun, and that I had to offer my own blood to complete the ritual. I tried to run, but the cult members caught me. They dragged me to the altar, and Marcus cut my arm with the silver knife. I screamed in pain, but then something strange happened. The wound started to glow, and I felt a surge of energy coursing through my body. I looked up, and I saw the Black Sun. It was a dark orb, hovering in the air, pulsing with a malevolent light. I felt it enter my body, filling me with a terrible power. From that moment on, everything changed. I became a high priestess of the cult, and I was granted access to the secrets of the Black Sun. I saw things that no human should ever see, and I did things that I still can't fully understand. But the power was intoxicating. I felt like a goddess, controlling the forces of the universe. I was feared and worshipped by the other cult members, and I reveled in their adoration. But then something else happened. I started to feel a strange presence inside me, something dark and twisted. It was the Black Sun, and it was consuming me from the inside out. I tried to resist, but it was too late. I was trapped, a prisoner of my own power. The cult had become my life, my identity, my reason for existence. And now, as I write these words, I know that I will never be free. The Black Sun has claimed me, body and soul, and I am a slave to its will. I am a monster, a creature of the darkness, and I can never escape the cult's grasp. But perhaps, in sharing my story, I can warn others. Beware of the seductive power of cults and their dark beliefs. Once you enter their world, there may be no way out. The thirst for knowledge and enlightenment can lead you down a path of terror and despair, and you may become a victim of your own curiosity. I pray that those who read my words will heed my warning and avoid the fate that befell me. The Black Sun is alive and well. We are still out here, waiting to claim the next victim, and then another, and another. But maybe, just maybe, my story can be a beacon of hope for those who have fallen into its grasp, and to prevent others, like you, from suffering the same savage and unspeakable fate.
I thought I had found my purpose when I joined the cult of the Crimson Moon. I was lost and alone, looking for something to believe in, something to give my life meaning. And at first, the cult seemed like the answer to all my prayers. The leader, a charismatic man named Father Malachi, spoke with such conviction and authority that I couldn't help but be drawn in. He promised us enlightenment, salvation, and a life free from pain and suffering. And for a while, I believed him. But as I became more deeply involved in the cult, I started to see things that made me question everything I thought I knew. The rituals we performed were bizarre and unsettling, involving blood sacrifices, strange incantations, and symbols I couldn't even begin to understand. Father Malachi preached about the coming of the Crimson Moon, a celestial event that would mark the beginning of a new era of enlightenment and spiritual awakening. He claimed that those who followed the cult's teachings would be spared from the destruction that would befall the rest of the world. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But then I saw the sacrifices. Innocent people, taken from their homes and families, their blood spilled on the altar in the name of the Crimson Moon. I watched as Father Malachi and his inner circle drank the blood, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I tried to leave the cult, but they wouldn't let me go. They said I knew too much, that I had seen too much, that I was a threat to their mission. They locked me up in a small room, feeding me nothing but bread and water, torturing me until I renounced my beliefs and begged for forgiveness. But even after I was released, I couldn't forget what I had seen. I couldn't forget the screams of the sacrifices, the sight of Father Malachi's twisted face as he drank their blood, the feeling of helplessness and despair that had consumed me. I knew I had to do something, to stop the cult from hurting anyone else. So I started to gather evidence, secretly recording their rituals and conversations, documenting everything I could. It was dangerous, but I was determined to expose the truth. And finally, after months of gathering evidence and building my case, I went to the authorities. They were skeptical at first, but as I showed them the recordings and explained what I had seen, they started to take me seriously. In the end, the cult of the Crimson Moon was disbanded, and Father Malachi and his followers were arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including murder and kidnapping. It was a small victory, but it meant everything to me. It meant that I had been able to do something to make the world a little bit safer, a little bit less terrifying. But even now, years later, I can still feel the cult's influence on my life. I can still hear Father Malachi's voice in my head, urging me to believe, to trust him, to follow him into the darkness. And sometimes, in my darkest moments, I wonder if he was right, if there really is something out there beyond this world, beyond this life, beyond our understanding. And then I shake my head and remind myself that it was all just a twisted, terrifying delusion, and that the only real truth is the one we make for ourselves.
As a child, I grew up in a strict religious household. My parents were devout followers of a small, secluded cult that believed in extreme discipline and self-sufficiency. We lived in a compound with other members of the cult, completely isolated from the outside world. I was taught that our cult was the only true path to salvation, and that everything outside of our community was sinful and corrupt. As a result, I never had any contact with the outside world and was homeschooled by my mother until I was a teenager. The teachings of the cult were strict and unforgiving. We were required to work long hours in the fields and maintain a strict regimen of prayer and study. Any deviation from these rules was met with harsh punishment. But as I got older, I began to question the beliefs of the cult. I couldn't understand why we were isolated from the rest of the world and why we had to adhere to such strict rules. I began to secretly read books and articles about the outside world, and soon realized that there was more to life than what I had been taught. My growing curiosity didn't go unnoticed by the cult's leaders. They saw me as a threat to their control and began to isolate me even further. They stopped giving me work assignments and locked me in a room for days at a time without food or water. I was terrified and alone, but I refused to give up my newfound desire for knowledge and freedom. Eventually, I discovered a hidden door in my room that led to a secret passage. I followed it to a small room where I found a radio and a phone. I knew I had to act fast. I contacted the authorities and told them everything about the cult, including the abuses and the isolation. Within days, the compound was raided and the leaders were arrested. I was taken into protective custody and eventually placed in a foster home. It's been years since I left the cult, but the memories and the scars still remain. I'm haunted by the knowledge that there are still cults out there, using fear and manipulation to control their members. But I'm also grateful for my freedom and for the chance to live a life outside of the cult's influence.
This is the cautionary tale of my daughter Jenna, who went missing several weeks ago. She went out for her typical jog one Wednesday morning, and, poof, just like that, she was gone. When she first disappeared, I was out of my mind, as any parent would be if their child were to disappear, regardless if they've already grown up into adults, like my sweet Jenna. My poor sweet Jenna, After speaking with the police detectives who were leading the investigation looking into her disappearance, I began to snoop around Jenna's belongings, looking for some kind of clue I could give to the police. They had zero leads. It was then that I found a diary hidden under a floor mat in her car. Jenna had always been curious about the darker side of life. As a teenager, she devoured true crime novels and watched every horror movie she could find. But it wasn't until she stumbled upon a website dedicated to cults that she became truly obsessed. She spent hours reading about the infamous leaders and their twisted ideologies. Jim Jones and the People's Temple, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians, Marshall Applewhite and Heaven's Gate. But it was the stories of the Children of God that truly fascinated her. The Children of God, or the Family International as they were later known, were a religious cult founded in the 1960s. They believed in a radical form of Christianity that encouraged sexual promiscuity and flirty fishing, where female members would use their bodies to attract new recruits. But it was their practice of Bible studies that really chilled Jenna to the bone. The Bible studies were essentially sexual rituals where members would perform acts of intimacy with one another in the name of God. Jenna couldn't imagine how anyone could be brainwashed enough to believe that such acts were holy. But she was also curious. What would it be like to experience such a thing firsthand? She scoured the internet for information on the Children of God and eventually found a forum where former members shared their experiences. Most of them recounted tales of abuse and exploitation, but a few spoke of a deeper spiritual connection that they had felt during the Bible studies. Jenna couldn't resist. She messaged one of the former members and asked if they could meet. They agreed to meet in a secluded park on the outskirts of town. Jenna arrived early and paced nervously as she waited for the former member to arrive. She had dressed conservatively, wearing a long skirt and a blouse that buttoned all the way up to her neck. She didn't want to give the wrong impression. When the former member arrived, Jenna was surprised to see that he was younger than she had expected. He introduced himself as Jonah and explained that he had been born into the Children of God and raised in the cult until he was able to escape at the age of 18. Jonah was friendly and easy to talk to, and Jenna found herself opening up to him about her fascination with the cult. He listened patiently and then surprised her by asking if she wanted to experience a Bible study for herself. Jenna hesitated, but something about the way Jonah looked at her made her feel safe. She nodded her agreement, and they made their way deeper into the park, to a secluded grove of trees. The Bible study was nothing like Jenna had expected. There were no candles or chanting. No one was forced to do anything they didn't want to do. Instead, Jonah simply talked to her about his experiences in the cult and how he had come to realize that what they were doing was wrong. As he spoke, Jenna found herself feeling a deep sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. But as the sun began to set and the shadows grew longer, she began to feel a sense of unease. Suddenly, Jonah reached out and touched her arm. "It's time," he said softly. Jenna looked at him, confused. "The Bible study," he said. "It's time to begin." Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't realized that this was just the beginning. She looked around the grove, suddenly aware of how isolated they were. She wanted to run, to scream for help, but her legs wouldn't move. Jonah took her hand and pulled her toward him. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe with me." As the evening progressed, the members of the cult began to gather in a circle, chanting and swaying to the rhythmic beat of a drum. They were all dressed in white robes, and their faces were painted with strange symbols. Jenna felt a sudden sense of unease, and she tried to back away, but someone grabbed her arm and pulled her closer to the circle. She tried to resist, but the grip was too strong. As the chanting grew louder, Jenna realized that she was in the presence of something sinister. She could feel the dark energy emanating from the cult, and she knew that she needed to escape. Suddenly, the chanting stopped, and the members of the cult turned to face a man who had just emerged from a nearby building. He was tall and imposing, with a bald head and a long beard. He wore a black robe, and his eyes seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. "Welcome, my friends," he said in a deep, commanding voice. "Tonight, we shall perform a ritual that will bring us closer to our divine master. Are you ready?" The cult members replied in unison, their voices echoing through the night air. Jenna felt a wave of terror wash over her as the man began to speak again. "Bring forth the sacrifice," he said, and two members of the cult dragged a struggling goat into the center of the circle. Jenna tried to look away, but she couldn't. She watched in horror as the man raised a gleaming knife and plunged it into the animal's chest. The cult members began to chant again, and Jenna felt herself being pulled into the circle. She closed her eyes and tried to block out the sounds of the chanting and the screams of the dying goat. When she opened her eyes again, she was standing in the center of the circle, surrounded by the members of the cult. The man with the beard was standing in front of her, holding the bloody knife. "Welcome to our family," he said, and Jenna realized that she was trapped. She had stumbled into something far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. As the cult continued their ritual, Jenna knew that she had to find a way to escape. She bided her time, waiting for the right moment to make her move. Finally, as the chanting reached a fever pitch, she broke free and ran for her life. She could hear the members of the cult pursuing her, but she didn't stop until she reached the safety of her car. Jenna drove away as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. She had survived, but she knew that she had come dangerously close to being caught up in something far more sinister than she could ever have imagined. From that day on, she would never forget the true stories of cults and their terrifying practices. Unfortunately, it was too late. The damage was done. You see, Jenna never really escaped from the cult. She'd only managed to run away, for a while. Jenna found out the hard way, the worst kind of way, that sometimes, there is no walking back from a decision you've made. As for me, the words of Jenna's secret diary will haunt me until my dying days. I believe with all of what's left of my heart that my sweet daughter's disappearance was no accident. I no longer wait on the front porch swing for my daughter to return, for she will not, I feel it in my bones. She is either dead, or worse, at the hands of that damned cult.
We sincerely hope that these 5 stories have sent shivers down your spine and opened your eyes to the unspeakable terror of cults. May these tales serve as a warning to those who are foolish enough to dabble in the forbidden rituals of the unknown. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below to let us know which story had you shaking in your boots. Thank you for joining us on this bone-chilling journey into the abyss, brought to you by Scary Spooky Time. Until next time, stay spooky and never forget to confront your darkest fears head-on.